Introducing Carl Christian Buer from DG Information Society. No? I'm getting it wrong, my God, okay.
I introduced myself. So. Thanks, Rufus. Yes. Can you start the video? Or just bring it up?
The lights a bit low.
So, I'm in fact related to DG Information Society, but I'm working for European Commissioner Neelie Kroes, and she has recorded a small message for this event, which I hope will come up on the screen now.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, opening up public data will foster the participation of citizens in political and social life. Increase the transparency of this public resource is a good investment. Let me focus on just one aspect today. How large is this investment really in the long run? Not very large if we make everything accessible by default, by building this into our public administration systems and processes. And even smaller if we also get rid of case-specific licenses and controls and make everything reusable by default. Restrictions should have to be justified, not disclosure. And third, we in the Commission need to practice what we preach. Therefore, we will update the rules for the disclosure and reuse of the data we collect. And by next spring, we will launch a portal to make our data accessible and reusable. I hope that this can expand to cover other EU institutions and agencies soon. And fourth, we plan to launch a pan-European open data portal in 2013. It will federate existing portals, gradually expanding to cover data sets produced by public administrations at all levels, from local to European. Open data for Europe can only work in a bottom-up, federated fashion. It requires knowledge and dedication at all levels, in the public sector and among data reusers. This is a collective effort to make our society a better place. There is no doubt in my mind that events such as the Open Government Data Camp held in Warsaw this week contribute a lot to this. I wish you very fruitful discussions.
If you liked it, you can give her some applause. So my role is just to expand a little bit on these 3 minutes. That is the message, and now I'm just trying to explain some of the elements that may not be totally clear to all of us who are here, because I've read that there are more than 40 countries represented. That means that we have people from outside the EU, which is a great thing, but it also means that some of the, let's say, the structure and the mechanism by which we hope to help this development that Rufus just laid out will not be totally transparent, so I will try to make them a bit clearer. So, who was this lady? Why was she speaking to us about this topic? So, the European Union has an executive body which, funnily enough, also proposes legislation, and that are these 27 people here. One of them is the one you just saw. She's responsible for what we call the digital agenda, which is the IT policy program of the Commission for the next 5 to 10 years. It covers many different things, including, you may have seen yesterday in the press, investment into fast broadband, because we have broadband targets that want to have 30 megabit per second across Europe for everybody in 2020. And some more far-reaching targets as well, but this is one of the elements, and there are many others in the digital agenda. One of them concerns the improvement of the situation as regards the use and reuse of public sector information and of scientific information. So you have this presentation online, so you can find out the sources of these statements, but you can see that this is not just for this event that Neelie got interested in this topic. In fact, we have been discussing it since last year, and I've seen some people here who were actually discussing with our Commissioner last year these topics, and these discussions have been going on for a long time. And so she's really a champion of this cause, and we're trying to build on that inside the Commission to come out with something which makes sense. So, just for you to know, the Commission itself also has data, the EU has data. Here are some examples. We are providing them already, but we don't have a data portal, we don't have systematic licenses, we don't have a modern setup, we don't have APIs in many instances, and so on. We have all of these things somewhere, but it's all very fragmented. And so that is what she referred to as her plan for the open data portal next year. We also have an open access policy. The Commission runs the largest research funding program in the world, which is 54 billion for the last 7 years. And we are working to expand for the next 7 years, 2014, 2020, the requirement to make the outcome of these research projects available in open access across the board. That is the principle the Commission decided this last year, and now it is to be put into place later this year and next year in the legislative process. So that is policy that the Commission makes and proposes, but this of course is a democracy, despite of what many people like to say sometimes. So we also have, sorry, I'm jumping a bit, but here just a quick pointer to science. So these are some projects which are not only funded by us and should come to open access results, but they're also covering the subject matter. I think the LOT project is represented here at the camp as well, maybe some others are too, but it shows that this is a multifaceted game. It's not just about making a law that tells somebody else to put out data, but it's also about building things. So here you have the different roles of the Commission. We have the policy. We propose the old PSI directive as a public sector information reuse directive, which exists since 2003. As Nelly has mentioned in her talk, it's not very effective because there's many loopholes, and so we are working now, and she will present later this year a new proposal to update that. At the same time, we are having another policy instrument for open access, where we make a rule for our own funded research, but of course when it comes to all the other research, which is the bulk, the one funded by member states and others, we cannot force them to make things open access, but we can of course tell them that it would be a good thing and why it would be a good thing, and bring everyone together and research the way forward. We're also building infrastructure. For example, the portal that you just saw, mentioned by the Commissioner. We are having already a pan-European open access repository for publications. We are working to expand that to scientific data, and we are also building the open data research and community actions, not only by things like these travel bursaries that Rufus mentioned, but also by projects like the LOT project and others. The OKF is involved too. So this is kind of a more soft measure. It's not a law, but it helps to move things forward. And of course, then the question always comes up is, so this nice lady goes around and says nice things, so what about your own data? And what about your own websites? Do you really do these things that you tell others that you should do? And we're not yet there, but we're working on it. And here you see a few of the elements that we are trying to put in place. One important thing I want to raise your attention to: if the Commission proposes directive, then it goes to these stern-looking institutions who then have a go at them. Sometimes it takes years. And then in the end, if you're lucky, there is a directive. And then the member states have all a few years' time to put into their law books. So we're really looking at a long-term process here, which means that even if we propose something this year and these two institutions are very quick, the new PSI directive will probably not be enforced between 2014 and 2015 in member states. So it means all these things that we're doing here, all the other things are very important, because if nothing happens until 2015, one could maybe say that this community and the trend and the movement has stopped. We cannot stop for 5 years, we cannot afford that. And maybe in 5 years we will already be farther than the law will be at that time. That would be my hope. The open data strategy Nelly mentioned. It is built on clear principles. That's why it covers open data and open access to scientific information. And the basic insight, and that I'm sure is nothing new to anybody in this room, is that if the public funded something, it should also maximize its own benefit from what it has funded. And the belief is then that the widest dissemination for reuse of the outcomes is the best way to get there, even though there may be some data sets that are never used. You mentioned thousands. Sometimes, if we really disclose everything, there may be thousands, but who cares? That is in the end the answer, because if you would first analyze which data set really makes sense to disclose, you would spend more money on that than you could ever generate by people picking it up later on, doing things you have never dreamed of. So that would be the approach, and then the main vehicle to get there is to really say that you pay once for the data. You pay for the people who collect it, and then later on you make sure that everybody can have access, and not let everybody pay again, because that's not only a paywall, it's also a massive transaction cost that just prevents experimentation, creativity at the end. And as Nelly also said in her statement, the belief is also that if you make this the routine, if you build it to the system, then you can drive down costs. That's what she means when she says the investment is small. Because when we speak to the public sector, often what we get back is people saying, well, we look at the economy, we don't have money, we can't do this thing, so let's wait. But this is an investment, and investment will be smaller over time if you just build these things into our systems. Everything is, or not everything yet, but much of it is already an IT system, so the extra cost of building these connectors to disclose things ultimately can be approaching zero, as we have seen that the dissemination cost over the internet itself approaches zero. So that is the goal, and of course it will take many years to get there, and you also have to follow a bit of a pragmatic approach, because if you send to the Parliament and to the Council something which they perceive as radical or undoable, it will simply die in there. There have been things waiting in the Council since the 1970s, which still exist. Every few years somebody remembers them and tries to move them forward, but it doesn't go anywhere. And of course we don't want this to happen for this important file. And so you have to make trade-offs, you have to make choices. And I think it is highly significant that this is maybe as much about perception as about the rule and the actual words in this law, because it will take time for it to become a law. So it's much more important that a very good thing is proposed and defended with good arguments, because we see it happening. We see it in member states, we see it at the regional level, at the local level. People are moving, it is still a small community, and often you have one or two people in some field who are working on this, and if they're ill, nothing happens. So it's very person-based still, and of course we have to get beyond that. But it's already something, so these people must be supported and further encouraged to do this work. And we also need different instruments to do that. The PSI directive is only one. I mentioned for open access the research funding, which is already existing now, which will go on to exist in 2014 at the latest. And so there's lots of open data that comes out of this, because it will be research data, and that's in the size it's often much bigger than spending data, for example. And lastly, nobody likes exception. I'm a computer scientist myself. I like if I have a rule that applies everywhere, that's the neatest and best. But we also have to see that there are entrenched business models, there are situations that are very difficult to run up against, and so it's also a question of where to concentrate our power and our force, and how to get the most out of a pragmatic situation, out of a real situation where you cannot just choose the surroundings that you would like to have. And so finally, just to drive home that point, it's not about the law, it's not the PSI directive. Many people don't even know about this. I was recently giving a talk about this in Germany, and for 2 hours people were speaking about the 27 German freedom of information laws, but not about the one law they have which implements PSI, which has the advantage of being applicable to everybody, whereas all the others are either federal law, regional law, or area-specific laws. And that I find very interesting, and I think we will manage in the future to make the new PSI directive a bit better known and also used, because it is an additional thing that people can waive and that they can point to when they ask for more data. And it's of course the basis for this argument which goes out and says, you public sector, you should build this going forward. If you do a new system, please think about this first, so that you can adapt your processes and make this part of the job description and not part of something which happens ad hoc, which people don't like to do, which is just somebody knocking at the door wanting something, and then it's extra work for the people, they don't like to do that. So this is also one of the pragmatic things that I wanted to put forward. So you have pointed to this video message you saw this morning. I would hope that many people have a look at that, and also at some other presentation we have more links. And of course I will also be here this whole day. So if people would like to find out a little bit more what's happening in the Commission, who are the people who are actually working on these things, if you have good ideas, let me know. This is also, as Rufus said, about connecting and driving this forward together. Thank you very much.